Betrayal is a word that carries weight. It evokes images of backstabbing allies, broken promises, and schemes unfolding in the shadows. But in the world of power, betrayal is neither good nor evil. It is simply a method of survival. Niccolo Machiavelli did not see betrayal as an act of treachery, but as a strategic move, a necessity dictated by the ever-shifting game of control. To him, loyalty was a fragile illusion, and those who relied on it were doomed to be consumed by their own naivety. Machiavelli was not a king, nor did he ever hold absolute power. Yet his observations of rulers and their struggles with treachery became the foundation of his political philosophy. He watched as men who trusted too easily fell, while those who betrayed at the right moment rose to greatness. His conclusion was simple. In a world where alliances are temporary and trust is a weakness, the only way to survive is to play the game better than anyone else. He admired those who understood this. He respected cunning over righteousness and deception over honesty. The rulers who thrived were not those who sought to be loved or who kept their promises, but those who knew when to strike, when to deceive, and when to betray. In Machiavelli's world, betrayal was not a matter of morality. It was a tool. Just like war, diplomacy, and manipulation, the ones who hesitated to use it were the ones who lost. If there was one man Machiavelli admired most, it was Cesare Borgia, ruthless, intelligent, and fearless. Borgia embodied everything Machiavelli believed a ruler should be. He did not hesitate to use deception or treachery when necessary. He understood that in politics, survival depended on eliminating threats before they eliminated you. Borgia's rise to power was built on betrayal. He used alliances as stepping stones, breaking them the moment they no longer served him. When he needed the support of powerful families, he made promises of loyalty when their usefulness ended. He destroyed them without mercy. One of his most infamous betrayals was against his own military commander, Ramiro di Lorca. Borgia had used Lorca to establish control over rebellious regions, but once order was restored, Borgia feared that Lorca's growing influence could challenge his own authority. Rather than let this potential threat grow, Borgia acted first. He invited Lorca to a private meeting under the pretense of rewarding him. The next morning, Lorca's mutilated body was displayed in the town square as a warning to others. This was the kind of decisive action Machiavelli admired. It was not cruelty for the sake of cruelty, it was strategy. It was a preemptive strike against betrayal, before it could occur. Yet, despite all of Borgia's cunning, despite his mastery of deception, he made one fatal mistake. He trusted the Pope. Pope Julius, too, had once been Borgia's ally. But as soon as Borgia became too powerful, the Pope turned against him. Stripped of his titles and abandoned by his followers, Borgia fell from power. It was a poetic irony the master of betrayal had been betrayed himself. Machiavelli saw this as both a lesson and a tragedy. Borgia had played the game almost perfectly, but he had forgotten one of the most important rules. No alliance is ever permanent. Even the most powerful can fall if they fail to anticipate the betrayal of those closest to them. Machiavelli was not just an observer of betrayal. He was a participant. He had spent years navigating the volatile politics of Florence, working as a diplomat, negotiating with foreign rulers, and witnessing firsthand the consequences of misplaced trust. He had seen men rise through deception and fall through loyalty, and when the Medici family reclaimed power, Machiavelli himself became a victim of the very treachery he had written about. Accused of plotting against the ruling family, he was imprisoned and tortured. For most men, this would have been the end. But Machiavelli knew how the game was played. Rather than stubbornly holding on to old loyalties, he adapted. He distanced himself from his past affiliations, offered his services to the Medici, and sought to prove his usefulness. He knew that survival was more important than pride. It was during this period of exile that he wrote The Prince, a book that was not just a guide for rulers, but also a demonstration of his own understanding of power. He dedicated it to the very family that had once imprisoned him, hoping they would recognize his wisdom and restore him to a position of influence. Machiavelli's life was a reflection of his philosophy. He knew that the world of power was a place where yesterday's enemies could become today's allies, and where betrayal was not a question of if, but when. For Machiavelli, the most effective rulers were not the ones who ruled with brute force, but the ones who mastered deception. He argued that it was often more useful to appear virtuous than to actually be virtuous. A ruler who openly embraced cruelty would be hated, but one who hid his cruelty behind a mask of righteousness could maintain power without resistance. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to be both a lion and a fox. The lion represents strength, the ability to crush opposition, but strength alone is not enough. A lion that cannot recognize traps will be caught and destroyed. That is why a ruler must also be a fox, clever, deceitful, always aware of hidden dangers. He did not believe that deception was inherently wrong. In fact, he saw it as a skill that separated great rulers from weak ones. A prince who relied solely on honesty would be outmaneuvered by those who lied better. And in a world where others were always plotting, a ruler who refused to deceive would be at their mercy. Throughout history, some of the most successful leaders have followed Machiavelli's advice. They presented themselves as honorable while secretly engaging in betrayal. They maintained an image of trustworthiness while never trusting anyone themselves, and by the time their enemies realized the truth, it was already too late. Machiavelli's view of betrayal was not based on malice, but on realism. He understood that in the pursuit of power, personal feelings must be set aside to rule effectively. A leader must be willing to betray before they are betrayed. This is what separates those who rise from those who fall, the ones who cling to loyalty, who believe that promises will be kept, who expect gratitude from those they have helped. These are the ones who are eventually crushed by reality. The strongest rulers, the ones who last, are those who recognize the truth. In the world of power, betrayal is not an exception, it is the rule. Betrayal is not an accident. It is rarely impulsive, and it is never without reason. When a person betrays, they do so because they believe, at least in that moment, that their actions are justified. The betrayer sees themselves not as the villain, but as someone making a necessary move. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that betrayal was not about evil or cruelty, it was about survival. People betray because they see an opportunity that benefits them more than their loyalty does. When the risk of staying loyal outweighs the benefits, betrayal becomes inevitable. Some justify it through self-preservation. They convince themselves that they had no choice, that if they hadn't acted first, they would have been the one betrayed. This is why kings have executed their closest advisors, why generals have turned against their own rulers, and why business partners have sold each other out. Others betray because of greed, not just for money, but for power, influence, or social status. They see an opportunity to rise, and if betraying someone allows them to reach that next level, they will take it without hesitation. Then there is the betrayal of ideals. Some people do not betray individuals, but rather the values they once claimed to hold. A leader who once fought for justice may abandon their cause if it means securing their rule. A politician who once promised loyalty to their supporters may turn their back on them if it guarantees a place in power. But the most dangerous kind of betrayal is the one that is done in the name of something greater. These are the betrayals that are committed not out of selfishness, but out of a belief that they are necessary for the greater good. A ruler may justify purging their closest allies because they believe it will protect the nation. A revolutionary may justify betraying their comrades because they believe the movement is more important than individuals. Machiavelli wrote that the ends justify the means, and betrayal is often one of those means. The key is knowing when to use it and when to expect it. Machiavelli may have lived in the 15th century, but his lessons on betrayal remain relevant today. Modern politics is filled with Machiavellian tactics, and some of the most powerful figures in history have mastered the art of deception. Consider how political leaders rise to power. They do not always start as the strongest, the richest, or the most influential. Many of them begin their careers by forming alliances, gaining trust, and building a network of supporters. But as soon as they achieve power, they no longer need those alliances. They begin to discard those who help them, often betraying the very people who put them in power. This is not a mistake, it is strategy. A leader cannot afford to be tied down by old loyalties. The moment someone becomes a liability, they must be eliminated. History is filled with examples of leaders who turned against their own allies the moment they became too powerful. Joseph Stalin purged his closest supporters once he no longer needed them. Napoleon Bonaparte betrayed many of those who had once stood by his side in order to strengthen his rule. Even in democratic politics, politicians frequently break promises, abandon their supporters, and shift alliances to maintain power. Machiavelli would not have condemned these actions. He would have seen them as necessary. A leader who refuses to betray when needed risks being betrayed themselves. Machiavelli was not just interested in how to betray, he was also concerned with how to avoid being betrayed. He knew that betrayal was inevitable, but he also believed that the wise could see it coming and take action before it was too late. The first rule of self-preservation is to never trust completely. This does not mean you should be paranoid, but you should never assume that loyalty is absolute. People are loyal as long as it benefits them. The moment it becomes more profitable to betray you, they will do it. The second rule is to control information. Many betrayals happen because someone knows too much. If you allow others to have power over you through secrets, personal weaknesses, or financial dependence, you make yourself vulnerable. The less others know about your true plans, the harder it is for them to turn against you. The third rule is to always have leverage. If someone has the ability to betray you without consequences, they will do it. But if betraying you comes with risks, they will think twice. This is why powerful rulers always held something over their subordinates, whether it was wealth, land, or blackmail material in modern terms. This could mean controlling key resources, having influence over others, or making sure that if someone betrays you, they suffer too. Finally, the most important rule is to betray before you are betrayed. Machiavelli believed that hesitation was fatal. If you suspect that someone will eventually turn against you, do not wait for it to happen. Act first. Those who hesitate become victims. Those who move first become rulers. Machiavelli's philosophy was never about being cruel for the sake of cruelty. It was about understanding reality and using it to your advantage. He did not advocate for unnecessary treachery. He simply acknowledged that in the pursuit of power, betrayal is often a necessary step. The most successful people, whether in politics, business, or personal life, are those who know when to trust, when to deceive, and when to strike. They do not allow emotions to cloud their judgment. They do not make decisions based on morality alone. Instead, they assess every situation carefully and act based on what will bring them the most power, security, and control. Machiavelli's lessons remain as relevant today as they were centuries ago. In a world where betrayal is always a possibility, the choice is simple: either be the one who plays the game or be the one who is played.